This conference
camera and microphone.
this conference will now be recorded.
This webinar is about urban data platforms, and the Irish Lighthouse Cities will share experience on this topic. They present some use cases to show how the urban platform is used in Utrecht, Nice, and Gothenburg. I will do a brief introduction to urban data platforms and Iris, and after that, Bas van Minelbroek from Utrecht will present the Utrecht case. Stefan Roux, the Metropole Nice Côte d'Azur platform, and Noel Aldrich, the work in city of Gothenburg. After that, we have discussion between presenters. And in the end, we'll have questions and answer sessions. Questions can be asked in the chat, but also someone can use his microphone to ask a question. We need about 1 hour and a half. There are 2 slides for Iris project. More of you are quite familiar with Iris, and Kim post some links. It's the main the developments are around 5 key transition areas, and one of them is related to digital transformation. So we have transition track 4, which is related to the topic of the webinar, the urban platforms. We use the term urban platform. It's quite new term, and urban platforms are at the core of the digital transformation and are the basis for data-driven solutions that addressing the challenges of cities and communities. An urban data platform uses modern digital technologies to bring together and integrate data flows within and across city systems and make data resources accessible to participants in the city's ecosystem. The easy sharing of data between city services, organizations, companies, and citizens provides many positive outcomes for the city and the society. It is important, the openness of the urban platform is quite important. So cities benefit most from urban platforms when those platforms are open. According to German standards organization DIN, an open data urban platform is an urban platform that uses open standards and interfaces to guarantee compatibility and interoperability with other systems and other urban platforms. So compatibility and interoperability are key terms. And by having an open data platform, cities and communities can have a lot of benefits, can customize the platform according to their needs, avoid vendor locked-in and technology debt, share data with third parties, connect services and data more easily, and provide better digital services to their citizens at a lesser cost. In the Iris project, we have created a city innovation platform, which is the equivalent of the urban platform, that collects, manages, and exchanges data for the monitoring of the Iris demonstrations and also for the development of new applications and services. The platform and its components manage large volumes of data and information coming from domain-specific solutions like parking, air quality, energy consumption. Some of them are similar, common, some other are different in the 3 lighthouse cities. And the data came also from various sources from municipal system, external platforms, and other data sources. The platform is based on common reference architecture, standards, and essential components, and also share a common data governance plan. And by using these common components, each lighthouse city has developed a local instance of CIP. We will continue with the presentation of the Irish lighthouse cities, and each city will present some use cases to show how the platform is used. And after that, we discuss about the main lessons learned of the process. We will start with City of Utrecht. Bas van Millerbroek from CVT, a company that supports the municipality in the creation of urban data platform, will present what Utrecht does in this topic. Bas, I already make you an organizer so you can present.
Microphone.
Can you hear me now? And can you see my screen?
Yes, everything works now.
Everything works. Thank you. Thank you, Panos. Okay, the City Innovation Platform in Utrecht. Well, my name is Bas van Meulenbroek. I'm a senior software engineer and a software architect at CIVITY. CIVITY is responsible for transition track 4 in Iris Utrecht, the City Innovation Platform. Well, I'll give a short introduction to Iris Utrecht. Then I want to present a couple of use cases for the City Innovation Platform in Utrecht, and then discuss a couple of points of attention, well, for you to take into consideration when you get started on implementing a city innovation platform, or an urban data platform, as we call it in Iris. Oh, this is not working as expected. Okay, so I had the introduction. So Iris Utrecht, like Panos mentioned, well, the purpose of Iris Utrecht is to improve the Kanaleneiland Zuid neighborhood in Utrecht. It's a neighborhood in the west of Utrecht, close to the Amsterdam-Rijn Canal and close to a lot of highways, for instance, which have well, a bad effect on the, for instance, the air quality in Kanaleneiland. Like Panos mentioned, there are 5 transition tracks which have been defined in Iris. Transition track 1 in Kanaleneiland deals with improving the energy efficiency of apartment buildings which are being renovated. So they receive solar panels on the roof and, for instance, smart thermostats to better monitor their energy consumption. Transition track 2 focuses on providing solar energy to electrical buses and electrical cars. And those buses and cars, they can also deliver electricity back to the electricity grid if needed. Transition track 3 is the implementation of a car sharing program and implementation of electrical buses in Utrecht. And transition track 4 supports the other transition tracks by facilitating the exchange of open data. So the Open Urban Data Platform, or the City Innovation Platform, as we call it in Iris Utrecht, is part of this transition track. And then there's transition track 5, which focuses on involving the citizens in Kanaleneiland Zuid in the project. So for the rest of the for the presentation, I will focus on the City Innovation Platform. Within a municipality, there is a lot of data is being collected for certain different processes. And these data, they are often used inside what we call a silo or a vertical. So they are collected for a certain purpose, and the vendor of the system, they deliver the sensor, they deliver the tool to collect the data, and they are responsible for presenting the data as well. And then, so for this particular application, these data can be very, very useful. But using these data for other work processes, which might also benefit from these data, is often not that easy. It's not that simple to get these data out of these silos. So the purpose of the City Innovation Platform is to get data out of the silos and verticals and make them available for other use cases as well. So not just the one they were originally intended for, but also other use cases. So in this picture, you see the technical setup of our City Innovation Platform in Utrecht. So purpose of the City Innovation Platform is to provide easy to use access to data. And for that, we need a layered infrastructure. The first layer, which you can see on the bottom, is the ingestion layer. And so the City Innovation Platform supports different methods of getting data into the platform. And we can subscribe to queues. We can periodically harvest third-party APIs. We can provide an endpoint which can be used to directly push data to, for instance, from a sensor. And data can be uploaded via an API or manually. The second layer is the processing or harmonization layer. So data from different sensors is often published in a proprietary format, optimized for a specific setup. We convert this data to easy-to-use data using the smart data models from the Fireware Foundation. And other processes, such as an outlier detection, can also be applied in this layer. The third layer is the publication layer. We can publish the data in the City Innovation Platform using different APIs. So this allows users to select the API which best suits their needs, and we can add other APIs on top of the same data if needed. So at the moment we support the Fireware NGSI API, both version 2 and LD, and you can use that to access the current status of entities. The Fireware short-term history API provides access to historical information, so to download a complete time series for a certain entity, for a certain sensor. And we have GeoServer OGC services to work with spatial data, and we have the Seek and Data Store API. And since the municipality of Utrecht is using Tableau, we provide the OData REST API so that they can use the data for dashboards in Tableau and also Power BI. And so third parties can use those APIs in the presentation layer to develop their apps, their dashboards, their maps, data-driven models, etc. Examples of applications using the data from the City Innovation Platform are the tools to calculate the key performance indicators for the IRIS project, which were the original use case for many of those data streams. But there's also a digital twin for Kanalen-Eiland Zuid, which will include data from the City Innovation Platform. And the municipality has developed dashboards, for instance, to monitor crowd flow at busy places in the city. The City Innovation Platform is based on open standards, which means that the platform should rely on standards which are accessible for anyone. So there should be no limitation on the redistribution of the standard, and anyone should be able to participate in drafting the standard. This is to prevent a vendor login and allows us to govern the platform using democratic principles without handing over our users' data to big tech companies such as Google and Facebook. To implement the City Innovation Platform, we use open source software, preferably the Fireware generic enablers when possible. I would now like to present a couple of use cases of the City Innovation Platform in Utrecht. The first one is charging without a traffic sign, or laden zonder bocht in Dutch. So if we put up a charging station in the Netherlands, we have to put up a traffic sign there as well, stating that you cannot park your car there if you're not charging it. Well, putting up such a traffic sign is a significant cost because we have to pay for the sign, we have to pay for more maintenance, and there has to be a permit to put up the sign. And because of the sign, well, it attracts additional clutter in the street. So these signs, they make sure that there's additional resistance against the EV charging station. And so the purpose of Laders on the Bocht is to investigate whether we can also put up EV charging stations without a traffic sign. Will a charging station with a traffic sign attract less illegal use than a charging station without such a traffic sign? Well, we can evaluate that by comparing data from a parking sensor, which you can see in the picture in the cross, to the data of the charging station, which is the gray box. If we compare those, we can then determine whether a car has been parked there and whether this car is charging or not. And this allows us to determine whether the use is legal or illegal. We have been collecting data for more than a year, and the results show that there's no significant difference between charging stations with a traffic sign and charging stations without a traffic sign. But you can think of additional use cases for this setup. You might want to create a service where you can navigate to the nearest available parking spot and the nearest available charging station. Or you could use it to enforce parking regulations. So if you detect that there's somebody illegally parked, you could send out a law enforcement officer to find this illegal situation. The second use case relates to smart street lighting. So we have in Canale and site 50 smart street lights have been installed, and they can report their status themselves. So they can report whether they are on or off, whether they are broken, and they can send out an alert when, for instance, a car hits them and they are no longer standing straight. And they can be remotely controlled. So this information can be used to calculate the consequences of energy consumption if you change the settings of the smart street lighting. So you reduce the amount of time that they are burning, or you reduce the strength of the light, and then you can calculate how much the benefits from an energy consumption perspective are. An additional use case which has been implemented is that we connected these smart street lights to a system where citizens can report issues in public space. And so now the street light can report itself if it's malfunctioning, so the citizens don't have to do that anymore. They can see that it's already been noted and that there's probably somebody going to act upon it. But it also allows us to collect information regarding the street lights which the street lights cannot report themselves. And that is, for instance, if the street light is producing too much light so that people who are sleeping close to the street light, they cannot sleep well, or that the street light is not producing enough light in order to feel safe. And then that allows the administrator of the street lights to modify the settings of the street light. The third use case I would like to discuss relates to energy consumption. And so to be able to calculate the effect of energy saving measures, energy production and energy consumption data are being collected from different sources in the newly renovated apartment buildings. We can combine these into different energy consumption and different energy production data. We can do this at apartment building level. This allows us to determine the effect of certain energy saving measures. And this information can also be used to optimize the behavior of certain parties acting on the energy market. So they can compare their decisions to when there was a lot of demands of energy and when there was a lesser demand. For this use case, it's really important to aggregate the information to apartment building level. If it would be possible to identify individual households, you would violate applicable privacy laws. Therefore, the data cannot be used to compare the energy consumption from apartments in the top left or top right corner of a building with the energy consumption of apartments enclosed by other apartments. And that would be an interesting investigation as well, because you would expect that those apartments enclosed by other apartments will consume less energy than the ones at the edges of the apartment building. So yeah, these are three use cases of the City Innovation Platform in Iris Utrecht. But when you are going to set up a City Innovation Platform, there are a couple of points of attention to keep in mind, so to speak, the lessons learned maybe. We divided them in technical, the standards issues and the governance issues. So I'll start with the technical issues. I am a technician, so I don't see many technical issues, but I still think I can comment on them. I understand some of them. The first one is that if you want to use open standards and open source software for the City Innovation Platform, it doesn't have to be compatible with your existing IT infrastructure. And so an organization will already have an existing IT infrastructure, maybe based on proprietary software, and it doesn't have to be compatible with the open standards you want to apply. On the other hand, the existing IT infrastructure also provides you with the opportunity to reuse certain components. A second issue is that if you are basing your system on open standards and open source software, there is not a single one-stop shop where you can get the entire platform. You have to compile the platform yourself by using software components from different open source projects and different vendors. So this has the advantage that you might be able to reuse existing components already present. For instance, your organization will probably already have an identity management solution or a database system or a metadata portal. So no need to get a new one for that. But it also means that you might have to connect different software components together, which are not that often used together. And then there are numerous alternatives available, which you for different software components, which you might want to try out, since they could be better than the one that you're currently using, or not. And then a final aspect which is really important are security aspects. These take up more and more of our time. And so when we started with the ERS project 3 years ago, we could get away with patching our systems every 3 months. But nowadays, our hosting providers requires us to patch our systems every month in order to keep them up to date with the latest patches. And that almost feels like we're constantly patching our systems instead of developing new functionality. And I don't think that is going to get better. And then regarding open standards, well, there are, like I said, there are many different software components to choose from, but there are also multiple open standards you can choose from. Not as many as there are soft components, but still there's quite a lot to choose from. And so, for instance, in the smart city domain, you have the OGC Central Things API and the fireware ecosystem, which can do a similar task. We are using a fireware for our project, since it's easy to use and comes with an extensive collection of generic enablers, which implement a lot of the functionality we need for the city innovation platform. And then on top of that, we like to use the smart data models. These allow us not only to harmonize the APIs, it's, so to speak, the envelope in which we are using to exchange data, but also the data models, the contents of the envelope. And the way we've set up the city innovation platform allows us to use different APIs to publish our data, like I said in the technical slide. Fiverr also allows us to comply with the minimum interoperability mechanisms of the Open and Agile Smart Cities Association. Well, as you can see in the cartoon, open standards are by no means perfect, since they have to reconcile different competing interests. But I think they do serve their purpose of preventing a vendor login. We've tested it when you switch from one system implementing a certain standard to another system, implementing the same standard. You may have to tweak a couple of details, but you don't have to do major rework. You don't have to rebuild your system because it's a complete different API. I do see some issues with open standards because they're always a compromise. There's always a trade-off. They must be sufficiently flexible to allow for different use cases, but they must not be too flexible in order to make them work. A good example is the good old get feature info request from the OGC Web Map Service implementation specification. This one allows for so many different output formats, it becomes very difficult to implement a get feature info function, which is both user-friendly and generic. So that's where there's too much flexibility in a specification to cater for different needs. And as a consequence, what you see in such cases is that then different dialects for one standard start emerging, and then basically the standardization process has to start all over again to reconcile those different dialects and make them work together. So like I said, well, I'm a technician, so I think as technical aspects don't scare me that much, but I'm more afraid of governance issues. I think those are more difficult to deal with. At least that's what I think. Maybe there's other people who see this differently, people with different areas of expertise. But yeah, I see a couple of stakeholder or governance issues, and that's the stakeholders with potentially competing interests which are involved in the City Innovation Platform. For instance, it might be in one stakeholder's best interest to release certain data using a proprietary license, for instance, because it contains competitive information, which might also be useful for your competitors, which you don't want to put out in the public. And for others, it could be that it might be better to work only with open data. So the City Innovation Platform must be able to accommodate for all these different requirements. We worked around this by including the option to control access to the data in the City Innovation Platform. So we included an API management software for this. And this allows us to define different plans, and then a plan can be open. If you want to release something as open data, you just provide everybody with access. But it can also restrict access by requiring registration and an API key before you can access the data. And then you can have this API key, you can assign it automatically if anybody can use it. You just want to register who's using it. Or you can only provide the API key once you've heard what somebody wants to do with the API and that you agree with their use case. And then if somebody is abusing his or her API key, you can always revoke access by disabling the API key. Well, a second governance issue is that we spend a lot of time of getting access to the raw sensor data. It can be a tedious task. So you have to make sure that access to the data is recorded in a contract, so that it is clear that you want to able to use these data. And you don't have to just record who owns the data, but also that the data will be made available using an open format instead of in a proprietary format, which requires a software license to be able to access the data. And the unfortunate example is that we got a dump from an Oracle database once, which you need Oracle software to be able to read. But sending emails, placing phone calls, attending meetings, and arranging for non-disclosure agreements to be able to include the data in the City Innovation Platform has taken a lot of our time in our IRIS project, and still does. A last point is, before you start collecting your data, you should think about what you're going to do with the data. And so you should have a plan before you start. And so what are you going to do with the data? And if collecting the data serves no meaningful purpose, there's no point in collecting them. And then you have to also think about, is it okay to collect data for this purpose? Are there no ethical issues associated with using these data, for instance? And then maybe the most important aspect, who is going to be the judge of that, and who's going to make sure that everybody involved within the City Innovation Platform complies with those regulations. And not just now, but also in the future. How do you make sure that that happens properly? So to conclude, there are a lot of aspects to take into consideration when you want to get started with your City Innovation Platform. But please do not let the points of attention I mentioned scare you off. Because when you succeed in breaking the silos, you can derive so much more value from the data within your organization than just using them for one particular use case. And even better, other people might come up with use cases you haven't even thought of yet. And I suppose you could also always talk to the people from the lighthouse cities if you want more assistance or help or guidance. Thank you.
Thank you, Bas. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Next speaker is Stefan Roux from Metropolis Côte d'Azur.
Camera works and sound
Hello.
works.
Hello, everybody. Do you see my screen?
Yes, everything is working, so just go ahead.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Stefan Roux. I'm in charge to develop the City Innovation Platform for Métropole Nice Côte d'Azur. So as you can see, the territory of Nice extends from the sea to the mountains. This large area of experimentation make it possible to develop a concrete solution for the inhabitant, but for business and communities also. So the smart territory strategy is structured around the three priorities: smart, safe, and green, and is available in the areas of the environment and sustainable development, mobility, resilience, safety, well-being, civic engagement, and also inclusion. The action program carried out by the Métropole Nice-Côte d'Azur are based on the provision of territorial data as fuel for the collaborative development of innovative solutions and services for the benefit of economic, academic, institutional, and citizen actors. The Metropolitan Data Platform guarantees our sovereignty over public data by maintaining internal control of the end-to-end processing chain, from the collection of information by the sensor to its storage, then it's qualified used by our business services or by external community partners. Excuse me. Okay. So how we collect the data? We organize the collection of data from the territory, ensuring public control and fair sharing with the various public and private actors in compliance with public policies. As you can see, the life cycle of the data must be treated in the entirety, from the raw data output from the sensor to the refined, standardized, qualified, and contextualized data stored in the data warehouse to be valued in fine through new value-added services. So in this diagram, one of the key stages is the transformation of the data for standardization purpose, because standardization guarantees the independence of this data by the use of different production system, its durability, like historicalization, its ability to be cross-referenced with data from different business domain, and finally its ability to be reused by third-party systems. So this is why the Nice-Côte d'Azur Metropolis has invested for several years in this field of data standardization, and we have directly contributed to the definition of nearly 10 fiber data model in the fiber ecosystem. So as urban data platforms need to achieve interoperability of data, systems and services between different actors, it's important that city implement vendor neutral and technology independent components that everyone can use and integrate them into their existing systems. That's why the metropolitan data platform must be transversal and multi-domain, like energy, mobility, or environment. And also it must allow the creation of application for external users, but also for internal agents of the communities for the management of the city. It must be able to interact with platform of public actors, partners, but also with those of private actors, data and service providers. This interaction is only possible by relying a data model and open APIs. So you can see you have a schema of simplified the schema of the city innovation platform. Upstreams of the data transformation process from our experience are still complex technical challenges to be met in terms of data collection due to the particular context, like a large number of players in the field of connected objects, heterogeneity of the technical solution proposed, also multiple constraints related to energy management or the communication network used, and finally the absence of a universal recognized standard. No editor solution make it possible to manage the complex perimeter, and therefore it's imperative to have a flexible system allowing the creation of specific process and that allows integration of connector to this sensor through different existing communication protocols. In an operational or even crisis management environment, the collection system must have a high level of performance and resilience to guarantee the exhaustive processing of all flow, as well as a capacity to manage priorities between this flow. So in the next slide, I will present you one development we made around the city innovation platform with over region with some region of Italy, a free region. The goal of this work we do with them is to facilitate networking between companies and startups related to tourism, to create cross-border tourism sector. The project was called Smart Destination. It was a European project at the beginning, but now the project is ended, but it continues to be allowed to work. In this project, we develop and implement smart destination digital infrastructure, enabling the development of a common strategy for the management of tourist information flows. And we have defined a common management system for shared control of the platform, and finally establish and experiment infrastructure on cross-border tourism products. We have developed 4 data model. We have used one existing data model called the point of interest, but we have also defined 3 new data model, events, trip, and seaports. And each region, the 3 Italian region and region of Nice, we produce tourism data into our own city innovation platform. And we have developed a high-level search service that receive request and return the result of the search to the requester. As you can see on this slide, we have developed a smartphone application for Apple and Android that allow tourists to make research about his interest dependent of the region where he is located. On the next slide, you will see another example of how we use our city innovation platform. The goal of this project is to design and develop and the development of a monitoring platform for flood risk management in Mediterranean rivers using methodology and the technical process for the convergence and intelligent analysis of data from various sources like hydrology, meteorology, topography, and the definition of new reliable and early warning threshold, and the construction of relevant and integrated rainfall flow models. For the territory of Nice, the design and installation of an interactive information tool. Also, we have placed some totem along the Magnan River with the aim of developing a true risk culture and increasing the resilience of the territory. So in this use case, we use, so as I said, different kind of data, weather forecast, rainfall radar, and also weather observation. And so with this different data, we produce a new data with an algorithm. And so this new data use a new data model called water forecast to prevent in the future the level of the river. And with this forecast, so we are able to prevent citizens and to take action to have a safe city. So this is the end of my presentation. I have tried to show you, to demonstrate you what we can do with a city innovation platform, but also what we must take care when we want to implement a city innovation platform from the collection from the start of collecting data until the use of this data. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stefan. Very interesting. Thank you. So we are moving to Gothenburg with Noel Aldrich.
So, okay, do you see my presentation?
Yes.
Good. My name is Noel Aldrich. I work for the city of Gothenburg, and I am currently working with implementing a citywide city innovation platform, which is basically an upscaling of what we've done in the IRIS project, amongst other things. If we just sort of take a step back, what exactly are we talking about when we talk about urban data platforms or city information platforms? They're relatively simple in a way. We have a data source that we would like to bring in. We have some microservices or agents that would decode and convert this information to some sort of standard information. We have some sort of middleware and a data warehouse to store the data, and of course an API with contracts to publish it to the different business and data consumers. For many organizations, this has sort of increased the complexity in the last few years, where data is coming in not only from existing organizations, but the introduction of new sensors and connectivities, as well as from citizens and businesses and internal organizations that wish to share their data. And this creates quite a big demand of how to share the data, how to bring it in, etc. So this was one of the driving factors of why we actually went into the IRIS project, to start to look at like how could we use BIM models, building information models, and try to share the data. Unfortunately, one of the things that it really showed for us was that some of the basic issues have to be dealt with. Even though you have the data, it may not be possible to share it, or more you have to do more with the data before you can share it, divide it up into different parts, etc. So also what we've seen is that there are organizations that are really coming up and sort of taking the bull by the horns and leading forward. IRIS has been really working well with these questions and with the data platforms, and we see that Open and Agile Smart Cities is also a fantastic organization. Almost all are pointing to the Firewire foundation and the solution that is there. EU digital and data spaces from our side is just a continuation of this work. So one of the biggest problems we have in Gothenburg is actually the size of the city. We're a small city, but as an organization, we're quite big. We have basically 60 different authorities, administrations, as well as companies within the city. And the city employs 53,600 people. So we've got quite a big turnover. But this means, in essence, we have a huge digital legacy. We have loads of systems, and some of the challenges, how do we get out this data? And this has sort of come up with the BIM. Now, basically, I've sort of gone at this from a different way. I've sort of listed up all of the challenges that we've seen, and this is more in the form of a checklist of how we deal with the problem and how we are dealing with the problem. A big problem that we see is that the market is very immature and moving very quickly. So when it comes to data spaces, urban data platforms, what you read today and what you read next year can be like totally different things. And this sort of creates a challenge for us as a city. How do we procure these systems when they're moving so quickly and our processes are so slow? So here, a good way of dealing with this, as well as the legacy systems, is to really take a good look at interoperability, because this will allow you to deal with both your legacy systems as well as procuring new systems. As I mentioned, one of the challenges we have here in Gothenburg is how do we combine these two things? So interoperability is not just a question of external interoperability. How do you create good interfaces outward, but also internally within the city? As well as that, we sort of see Gothenburg as a city within Europe. So interoperability in that respect within Sweden, within Europe, is quite critical. Here, NGSI is a really good way of dealing with this. So we've seen this quite early on, that this is the spider in the middle of the web. Another thing that we sort of think that really has to be thought through, and that is the IT architecture. And this is sort of a classic way of dealing with it. Separate the people who produce the data from the people who publish the data. As a city, we've procured quite a lot of silo systems. and they work well. But really the challenge is when the data needs to be spread. So a really good sound IT architecture should be like fundamental combined with your interoperability. The next question we've seen also is that horizontal and vertical integration. It's very easy to focus on vertical integration within a sector, that you look at a specific problem and only think that the data is moving in that way. You really have to sort of think that the data will move both in the vertical within a sector as well as in the horizontal. And this is where we see the spillover effects, where other administrations want to acquire data from other companies and organizations within the city. But it's not really possible because the data is in another format or it's locked into a silo system. So we have to have an integration that works both vertically and horizontally. And here I'd like to point out that the data models that move in the vertical don't have to be the same as the data models that move in the horizontal. So that if you have data models that are well defined for transport or healthcare or whatever, that's good and well. And they work well in the vertical within their area. But think that the data models, when they move in the horizontal, they might have to be in a different way. Open source is also a really good technology to think about. Maybe it's a little strange, I write it under the word technology, but as I mentioned to begin with, it's very easy to get to think, to see that this market hasn't really matured yet, and it's hard to procure services. A big worry for a lot of organizations and for us is that if we procure something, are we going to get locked into a frame agreement with a company that might not be relevant next year or the year thereafter? And do we know enough about what we want to procure that we can actually do a good tendering process? So open source can be a very good way to take a step into the market, or to step into the problem, that to use this as a platform as a trampoline to sort of take a step in and start to work with the questions. It doesn't have to solve all of the problems, just some of the problems, so that you can start to build up a knowledge and a competence and how to deal with this problem, because it's not trivial. It requires a lot. We also get this question that open source will kill the market. Well, in essence, it actually does the reverse, because you need to have competence to use open source. So a good question is, do you have the competence and knowledge within your own organization? And for a lot of people, they actually have to go out and tender consultants to help them. And this creates competition in another area. So it can be good to sort of have a good look at open source and see, okay, can this be a way for us to take a step in, use that product to build up a capability within the organization, and then maybe at a later stage procure a product, or maybe even develop the open source product. Open source is also a very good way to actually share results between cities. So you can just put the result out there, and then it's up to every city out there to actually to bring in that open source and to put it into production themselves. Another thing that we sort of found in our scaling up process is container technology, containers, Kubernetes. This is something that's quite central in the urban data platform. We see it again and again. And container technology you can use to create a private cloud. This is great at this moment in time when we don't really know how to deal with a lot of legal issues. A lot of the microservices and fireware, they're built on this technology. And what I would really like to lift up here is that this is not trivial. If you don't have that capability in your organization, you really need to have a good long look at it, because it will take time to achieve this capability. Now, the onboarding process and governance, as Bas and our colleagues here in Nice said, it's information classification. It's if you don't know how to share and have control over the information, or if you don't have the information classified and you know exactly the legal implications of the data, then you can't share it. You basically can't do anything with it until this is done. So a very important starting point is to have good processes and routines for information classification. And this really has to be worked into the different organizations who own the data. We saw this with the BIM files, the building information files, that they were basically the building information models, or a 3D model of buildings. It was basically developed to build with, for the project to build a building. But when we wanted to share it, they couldn't actually say which part of it we could share and which part of it was classified and had to have a higher level of security. So it ended up being a problem that nobody had really thought about how to deal with this data, and it was all mixed up. So information classification is central. So this is something everyone has to work with, and we're not done with it. We have to work with it from day one. Data sovereignty is also a very important question that you really have to think about. Data is the raw material, and the big question is, do we own our data? Now, we've seen this time and time again. You may own the data, but you don't own the format that it's stored in, or you have to pay to access the data. These things really have to be thought about, and also like in the procurement process. How do we do this so that it's not locked into a system? Here again, many of the times people are saying, oh, we'll just use a data lake, throw the data into a data lake and we'll sort it out. But again, if you're putting data that's not classified into a data lake, you might be combining data with different information classifications. And here you end up in big problems. Federated solutions. Legal issues may require that data is actually held in different containers, so there's no possibility of the data leaking in a database. So if you put two data sources or data sets in a database, in one database, that can be perceived as a new data set because you've combined two data sets from two different organizations. So this can be a bit challenging. From a technical point of view, it can be very logical to combine data because it makes it easier to work with. But from a legal perspective, you've created a new data space and a new data set. And this, from a legal point of view, can be incorrect. So here, federated solutions using container technology can be a very good way of working forward. And the federation, of course, is to use the same APIs to access the data in the different federated solutions. Remember that your IT architecture is a very good way to create competitive tendering. And here you can actually use the complex broker, amongst other things, to actually get this issue out there, so that yeah, you can break up the monopolies by separating different parts and different users. This is also sort of a key question. This is the whole urban data platform. It's not an IT issue, it's not a digitalization, it's a business development. The need for an urban data platform is just as much internal in the city as external. So at the end of the day, it's really important to understand that the businesses have to be, the business areas have to be involved from the beginning. First and foremost, with the information classification to identify who owns the data. And this will be a service so that they'll have to pay for sometime in the future. So they have to understand what are they paying for. At this moment in time, we see some of the driving factors as the use of sensors, as well as the wish to use AI and BI, artificial intelligence and business intelligence. Now, quite often things begin with somebody sees like they want to use a robot, or they want to use AI or BI in their business area, but they soon see a need for SIP as well as a UDP because there is no data, or they can't get at the data, or it's locked in. So for a lot of people, you can't have AI and BI if you don't have a SIP or a UDP. The other thing to be aware of is that a lot of initiatives that are going on, and this is something that IRIS is also pushing forward, these will soon be policy within Europe. So when we see sort of things like Living in EU, as well as the data space initiative and the European interoperability framework for smart city communities, they're all sort of pushing and working towards an interoperable framework that's built on the same models. And at this moment in time, it looks very likely that the Firewire Foundation will be the basis of this. Now, as you can see, I don't really have that many points here because really it's the other points that affect these quite a lot. The data models are vital, and there are many standards out there, and it's very easy to get lost in all of the different standard data models, etc. Here, it really is good to have projects like IRIS, as well as other initiatives like the Open and Agile Smart Cities, because you can utilize that knowledge and experience and point to it. This is a reason why we were taking these steps. The other thing we notice with data models is that there are two different types of data models. There's the internal representation as well as the external representation. If we just think about this with the sensors, internally we want to show the exact position of the sensor as well as the value. But when we publish the data, it's not a given we want to show the position of the sensors, as quite often people think it's fun to go and find them. This we've seen in several examples in Gothenburg where the sensors get stolen. So we don't publish the physical position of the sensor. And when you're showing the temperature of a bathing strand, of a beach, it's not the temperature of the sensor, it's the temperature of the beach. So it's important to sort of see that there are data models internally as well as data models externally. So it's good to think about that when we're looking at the smart city data models and which parts of it do we publish outwards as well as inward. This is a work in progress. I don't think anybody will ever be finished with this. And for us, it's very important to understand that if we stick to a rigid standard, we're probably going to get stuck quite quickly because most of the standards haven't really reached a good level of maturity. What's really good with the smart city data models is it's possible to develop them and work together with other cities and move forward with them. So we see one of the most important things is the collaboration aspect, so that we develop the data models together as well as learn from one another on how to use them. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much. Very nice overview.
I don't see any questions yet in the chat, so if there are any questions from anybody, you can just unmute yourself one by one and just ask the questions, and we'll do them accordingly. So any questions? Very quiet today.
Maybe it's good to have, because I see in the participants Matthias Koch and Thomas from City of Utrecht. maybe they can share from the municipality point of view some experience.
Yeah, as I just mentioned in the chat, I thought it was very interesting. I don't have any specific questions, but I really learned a lot, so thank you.
That's great as well.
Especially from the insights of Gothenburg was very interesting, so thank you for that.
Thank you.
How about our fellow cities that we work with? Any questions from these cities? Any question is fine. You don't have to be shy about the level of detail or if the question is too silly or not. Oh, Maurice, come on.
I have one question. It was really interesting. Just the materials that you have shown, the presentations. Are we able to get those presentations? Because we are actually writing a proposal right now in the city of Vasa. We're going to build our platform, start building it in autumn, and all these issues that you presented are things that we are now either having to know before we apply or after we've started the project. So very good information, and I would like to take those slides to our stakeholders and groups and go through them with them.
Absolutely. And you also will have this video that Panos is recording as a reference they can use.
Thank you.
I see that Eva has raised her hand for a nice question to the panel.
I hope. Hi, Eva from Johanneberg Science Park. I also have two questions. The first one is addressed to Utrecht and Nice. Actually, I will really like to know what was the biggest challenge that you faced when it comes to maybe data collection for your innovation platform, and how did you handle it? Because you presented some use cases, could you refer to the most complex challenge you had faced so far?
Do you want to go first, Stefan, or should I go first?
Okay, thank you. The biggest challenge for me is the quality of the data, because to get the data, to collect the data and store the data into CIP, it's technical. It's not more complex, even if it's complex. But to ensure quality of data, to have data each time, fresh data, it's more complicated because it's technical and system, and there is nobody looking each second, each time if the data is present or not, if it's old data or fresh data. So for me, it's the biggest challenge if we want to develop after different use cases, different components, dashboard or application. We must ensure the quality and the availability of the data. So, I don't know if I answered to your question.
Yes.
So the quality and measuring that was the hardest part for you.
In Utrecht, it was difficult to get access to some of the data sets because, well, the municipality then thinks they own the data, but then they have it outsourced to a company to collect the data who have outsourced this to another company. So then before you're talking to the person you actually need to actually get access to the data, that's a lot of phone calls and emails before you're there. And then what Stefan says, so once you have the stream up and running, we have some automatic monitoring of is there still data coming in. And then indeed you every now and then notice that a connection breaks down because somewhere an IP address or a password has changed, and then you have to figure out what went wrong again to get the connection up and running again.
Yeah, thank you for your answers. And do you have any recommendations on how to solve these problems of the access of data? I suppose it's the same
so
here. Is of course the beginning of this journey, but
yeah, so I think you should make this very clear in the contract when you take out a subscription, for instance, on a sensor, that you want access to this data and that you want access in an understandable format, not in some funny format you need a software license for to be able to read it. And to keep use those automatic monitoring tools to keep track of whether your platform is still running properly, because there's no way you can do that manually, or you don't want to be notified by your users that there's an issue. You want to be proactive and notice that beforehand.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Noel, do you have any remarks on that quality and getting hand of the data?
Yeah, this is really something that comes up again and again, that when you're publishing the data, is the quality good enough to publish? This is sort of an interesting question, because it's important to see data as a dialogue. There's no data that doesn't have problems with it. So when you publish data, you sort of have to build in that you will get comments on it, and how to feed those comments back, and use the citizen engagement as a positive aspect. Quite often when you publish data, or when a city publishes data, it's seen as a one-way system. The data is only going out. So if there's anything I would recommend is that make sure that when you publish data, you can deal with all of the comments that come in about the data, and use that as a positive way to increase the quality of the data. So in many respects, you can use publishing data as a way to increase the quality of the data, if you deal with it in a good way. If you have no mechanism to update the data and to deal with the comments from citizens or companies, then you create a problem. I don't know, maybe I can give a good example earlier that we had for a few years ago with the bicycle application that we had. There we were sorry?
Please do.
Yeah. There when I was working at the city urban transport authority, we didn't really have control over the data of all of the different places where you could actually lock a bicycle. And there was a certain amount of worry that when we published that data, that we would be shouted at that we didn't have good quality of the data. But because we implemented a mechanism that actually built upon that, it was easy to update the data source and then feed that back into the organization. From the first day, we had 300 bicycle parking lots. And I think we came up to 1,500 within a week, because citizens rang up and complained that there wasn't parking in the app at that spot. We could deal with it directly and then put it into the database. We verified it, of course, and put it into the database. And this meant that both the citizen was happy and that the quality of the data increased. So here we used it to a very positive aspect. So the owner of the data actually ended up with a higher quality of data by publishing it than just by sitting on it and saying they needed to increase the quality of the data. So it can be a very, very positive thing if it's dealt with in a correct way with the technology in the SIP.
That's great. There is a question in the chat as well. Noel mentioned a data lake. Are you using any solutions to implement it? And what is the byproduct that you use? Or the BI product?
The BI product that we use actually is Click. But we have a problem using a data lake, because again, the concept of a data lake is just dump all of your data into a data lake. and then you can deal with the data in the data lake. This sounds like a very good, easy way to deal with it. And yes, if you're a single authority, you can do this because the data is under one authority. But the problem being when your multiple authorities are legal entities, if you haven't classified the data, you can't put it in a data lake. And if you start to put lots of different data sets in a data lake, it can be problematic that you're combining data and doing something that might be considered illegal. So it's not trivial with a data lake, the concept anyway.
All right, time is running short, so we have one more question, and I thought maybe after that Jutta could just ask a couple of questions. She's from RISE and researching a lot of the work we're doing. So, question regarding the approach when starting to build an urban data platform. Noel talked a lot about specifying a lot of things before starting. How about small and fast pilots and learning as you go?
Yeah. This sort of comes down to, do you want something quick and dirty, or do you want something high quality and good? The problem being is that a lot of this with the information classification, and that takes a lot of time and resources to actually, who owns what. If you don't do this at the beginning, you're sort of building a house of cards. It's very easy to do something very quick, especially in a vertical. But if you're looking to build a good quality urban data platform, then you really have to go into the governance-y questions. And this is sort of all of the boring stuff with policies, etc., within the city. So I think this is quite challenging if you're going to really upscale it. If you're just working within a specific sector or with a specific authority, or in a smaller city even, I think it can be a lot easier.
Or just testing out the equipments that you want to know how they use and how they work for your specific metrics that you have in your urban data platform. That could be a method, but maybe not go into a different department and try to work with them for their data. That could be hard to come by because it's, different barriers and we don't know who owns everything. Does Bas or Stefan have any kind of short insights on doing a small and fast pilot and learning as you go?
Yes, you may learn, you will learn a lot, but then you have your quick and dirty solution, as Noel puts it. So then you might run into difficulties when you want to scale it up to something which is more widely used. So yeah, you might end up with a lot of prototypes. But yeah, as long as you keep that in mind, it's okay. I mean, if you don't mind throwing your prototype away and start all over again, I don't see why not learn a lot from it. And it's certainly a way to get started.
Yeah, good point. Learn from it and trash it.
Yeah.
Stefan?
Nothing else to add. Yes, I think you must test and go. To begin, we have all the kit to start the city innovation platform, and every of us can help each of them to start to implement a city innovation platform and process.
Yeah, good, great. Jutta, do you have anything that you would like to ask this? Because I know that you're collecting information for research and KPIs and such.
Well, I don't have any specific question here, but I can see that you're battling with the same problem as we battle as researcher. Collecting data, who owns the data? I mean, if we're collecting by ourselves, it's easier as a researcher because then usually we own the data, but also in which format we have to store them. And we usually are now those days more and more forced to share them as well, but in which format can we share them? I see all the same problems you have on a bigger scale, I guess, as we, but yeah, I see all those boundaries which we have to face and to solve somehow, how we can handle and treat things. Because on a way it's good if you can share a lot of information. On the other one is risk who own the data, and also that we don't give any data which we are not allowed to give out and stuff like this. So I think Noah was talking a lot about those issues in Gothenburg there as well. And yeah, I think we have pretty much the same problem as researcher those days. Somehow we should have everything open source. On the same side, we have to be careful with our data. So it's an interesting insight here. It was interesting to listen to you, to see it's kind of the same trouble.
All right. I have a question for Thomas, who is kind of the product owner in Utrecht. If you would like to elaborate on how you, as the owner of this project, have been working with the rest of the city of Utrecht in implementing and talking about it, selling points, ideas that might work for different cities that are going into this sort of installation and ideas.
Well, thank you for giving me the word, Kim. Am I audible? Or
yes, I can hear you.
Oh, all right. Sorry, I came in later in the meeting, so I missed a lot of the discussion. And well, to be a product owner is perhaps a bit too much. Well, I think in the beginning, with the cities on board with Civity, with different partners, we really tried to get the concept right of an open urban platform, to try and get the standards right. So we made the architectures, we realized different services, and it's really the challenge now is how in which use cases can we demonstrate what we've built, and does it do what it's designed for? And I presume Matthijs has told about the use cases we've done in Utrecht. And of course, as everybody says, you have difficulties in gathering the data, getting the right data quality. From the from the platform side, that's not the technological side. That's not the biggest challenge. It's really about getting the data and the right quality of data. I thought that was mentioned before. And what I see is that if you develop data-driven services, for instance, what we've done with the smart solar parking use case, different parties are having a stake in the business model you are developing, and we can do it once, but to get it scalable, there's really a challenge, because everybody gets a small part of this this business case, and well, it's not clear how you can really make these new business models sustainable. So I don't have a solution for it, but this is something I see when we're trying to realize these very good services. It's still, the technology is there, but getting a business model that's sustainable for the different parties, that's really a challenge. How do you monetize on the data you're sharing? How do you monetize on the application you are building, servicing? Those are a few of my thoughts.
Thank you. Great. I think we're running out of time, so I want to leave this meeting to Panos and thank everybody who's joined so far.
Yes, there is one question from Eva. Maybe we can spend 1 minute, someone. The vision, how we think about urban data platforms in 2030.
Maybe Stefan can go on, then Noel, then Bas. Where do we see this data platform in 2030?
In 2030? Well, I don't know. It's difficult to project in 8 years. It changed so fast and so quickly. It's
Do you see its place in NIS in 2030 still?
It's in NIS, the CityNo platform is in place. It's used in real project. It's more and more used in many projects by different departments. They always ask to have the data into the city innovation platform. They ask to use the city innovation platform for the development of new product. So it's a real component in our architecture. But so the challenge for us is to have a really high availability platform because now I said it's really used by many systems to control the lights, to control the tunnel, to open or close the gate of a tunnel. So there is a lot of technology around the risk, and so we need to have a platform always available and that can make what we want to do. So it's the biggest challenge for us, but all the components are here to use it and to develop some business, some mechanism. So what will be the platform in 2030? I don't know. I think it will continue to be used, I hope, because we work very hard for this. So I hope it will be always here and present and used.
But it's still going to be used. That's basically what you're saying.
Yes.
Yep. Great. Noel, thoughts?
Yeah, I think basically it will be just part of business. I don't think it will be anything remarkable. It will just be normal and an expectation.
So you're gonna measure up to the expectations of the different departments that we have in the city, and it's gonna work for them.
Yeah, I think by that stage, hopefully, we'll be done.
Yeah, I think that's a good stretch of time to put it in to see if it actually is gonna be working. But
Well,
last words.
Yeah, it depends. I think it's a difficult question, but it also depends whether you're asking my pessimistic boss or my optimistic boss.
Optimistic boss.
Pessimistic boss, I think that the open part will have died out by 2030. And the optimistic me thinks that there's a lot of data coming in all these open urban data platforms, and that a lot of cool applications have been built on top of those platforms we cannot even think of at the moment. So that's what I hope. So that's the optimistic me.
Thank you. I hope we saved a lot of money and that there will be some good, fantastic new services for all the citizens.
Yes.
That's a good thought. All right, panel, shall we wrap this up?
Yes, thank you all. Very informative, the conversation. We will publish everything on website, and maybe we will came up with the next webinar on the topic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
See you next time.